Hi, I am Professor Salvador Espinosa. Welcome to this session on Learning Glass, where I am going to explain the foundations or the basics of the U.S. municipal bond market. This is just an introductory class that will allow you to get a good understanding, but it will be your first approach to the subject matter of different sessions. We can start thinking about the U.S. municipal market in this way. I am sure that most of you are familiar with a chart that looks like this. This is something that we learn probably in junior high. When we take an introductory course in economics, they tell us that this is going to be a supply curve, and this is going to be a demand curve. On this axis, we're going to have quantity, and on this axis, we're going to have prices. This is a market. So when someone asks you, well, what's a market? Then you can start thinking about something like this. What we're going to do is to try to explain how this works in the context of municipal bonds. Let's start with the basics. What is a bond? You can think about a bond as a contract, as a promise of payment. It will be a piece of paper that tells you that if someone gives a certain amount of money, that person will receive that money and some interest or some payments in the future. When we think about a bond, then that will be part of a contract that an issuer is signing with the person who is buying those bonds. Right now, we just need to keep it like this. It is a contract. Now, going back to the issue of the market, then what is a market? A market is a physical or non-physical place where suppliers of a certain good or service will meet with people who want or may be willing to purchase that good or service. When they interact in this physical or non-physical place, an exchange is going to happen when the price that the person supplying, in this case the bond, it's acceptable by the person who is willing to purchase a certain bond. So when we think about this in very general terms, well, usually what our professors tell us is that there will be a point of equilibrium where at a certain price, people will demand a certain amount of those goods or services. So this is a very general explanation, an abstract explanation of the meaning of a market. When we think about the application of this to the municipal bond market in the context of the US, we think about contracts. Contracts where municipal governments, and you can think about a city, a county, a special district, etc., are going to release to the market. They're going to issue bonds. So now we can draw another simple chart that is telling us the same issue of the market, but just represented in a different way. We are going to have someone that is going to be issuing a bond instrument. We are going to have another entity that is going to be buying that bond. We are going to call it a bond buyer. And then somewhere in between, or when the issuer sends a bond to the market, we are going to have another entity that we are going to call an intermediary. So when we have when we think about the municipal bond market, then we're going to think about someone like a city or a county that is issuing a bond. That bond is going to be a promise of payment. That is telling the buyer, if you purchase my bond, which is going to be that contract or that piece of paper that I showed before, which is a legal document, then in exchange of that money that you're going to give me up front, I promise to pay back a certain amount of money in the future and certain installments that we call coupons in a period of 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years. right in between issuers and buyers, we're going to have intermediaries. And when you think about intermediaries, then they play different roles. Some of them could be credit rating agencies. When you come to class and you have someone, a professor, who is going to give you grades, A, B, C, etc., for things that you do, well, there's a similar scale in the bond market. Companies such as Standard & Poor's or Fitch, they are going to issue grades or ratings that are going to be reflecting something about the condition of the issuer of a certain bond. Those credit ratings are providing some information to the buyer so that the buyer can decide if it's a good idea or if it's risky to purchase this issuer. Why do we need to do that? Well, if credit ratings or other intermediaries that are supposed to provide information to the market were not here, what if the issuer doesn't disclose the right information about their financial situation? What if they present a very optimistic scenario in terms of tax collection when that scenario doesn't exist? Then the buyer would get that legal contract that promised to pay money in the future, but at some point the issuer would say, I don't have money to pay. That would be a default. And we have seen a lot of those in the market recently. Other market players that are falling in this square of intermediaries are going to be legal companies that are called legal counsels or legal counselors. They are supposed to tell the buyers, or they're supposed to tell the market as a whole, if the bond that is going to be issued, it's tax exempt or not. That means if it's going to be paying taxes, if the buyer is going to be paying taxes on the profit that he makes on that bond or not. Or they're going to say if this bond or this contract fulfills all the legal requirements, for example, that come from the central government, etc. So they are providing important information. Then we're also going to have brokers in this market. The brokers, a lot of times, they purchase bonds from not only one issuer, but from different issuers. And they resell them to different buyers. So when we start thinking about this, well, it's not going to be as easy as this graph. It tends to be more complex because there are different players in this market. The players are going to be credit rating agencies, legal counselors, brokers, issuers, buyers, etc. So I tell you this because for some of the things that we're going to be doing in this class, you are going to be playing different roles. In some cases, you will play the role of an issuer. Think about you working for a city government in the debt management department, and one of your responsibilities could be to put together the documents to issue a certain bond. Another role that you might play is the role of a buyer. As a buyer, you could play the role of a portfolio manager. A portfolio manager is a person that tries to give the best profit to their investors by putting together portfolios of bonds. So you are not going to buy only bonds from a city. You are going to create a basket with different instruments that could be bonds from a certain city, and it could be other kind of financial instruments from corporations. Some of them are going to be more risky, some of them are going to be less risky. So you need to develop that knowledge of the market so that you know what to include or what not to include in that portfolio of investment that you are putting together. The other role that you may play, it will be the role of a bond analyst. As a bond analyst, you could be playing the role of a bond analyst on the side of the issuer, or you could be playing the role of the bond analyst with one of the intermediaries, such as credit rating agencies. As a bond analyst, one of your goals or one of the tasks that you need to fulfill is to put together information for buyers, for issuers, or for the company that is hiring you about the financial condition of the issuer. So you need to go back to information about the issuer and find out if the situation of that government, city or county, for example, is good enough to assure repayment of the bond in the future. So when we think about this in the context of the US, we think about a primary market and a secondary market. The primary market is where someone buys the bonds. But when you buy this contract and you have it in your hand, you might think that that you will be better off if you resell it. That's fair game. So at the moment that you purchase a bond and then you go back to the market and start selling or try to sell it, then you start participating in the secondary market. What I'm trying to tell you with this very broad explanation of the US municipal bond market? That for the purposes of the course in which you have enrolled, you will be playing different roles. In some cases, you might play the role of a bond analyst, for example, and as a bond analyst, I may ask you to put together a financial condition analysis for a particular city. You could also play the role of a portfolio manager that is going to make decisions about a certain bond or bonds based on the information that the financial analyst will be providing you. If we think about this possibility, I want you to picture yourself in that situation. You need to have as much information, as much as reliable information as possible about the bond, because something that you don't want to do is to purchase or to create a portfolio of bonds where you have instruments that are not secure or they are too risky. Because if you do that and the probability of a default on the part of the issuer goes up, then you may have problems when it's time for you to talk to your investors and tell them why the money that they gave you to create a profit is no longer there. So what we are going to do in different sessions is to play those roles and to learn some of the tools that they play in these different roles. But when we think about the US financial market, the US municipal bond market as a whole, this is a general idea of what you will be facing. Thank you very much for listening.